say definitively that religions are all bullshit.
Welcome to Brainstorm.
We have the explicit tag for a reason.
This is a base level argument to a higher level morality.
I get paid to science?
Two science as much as one can science.
What the hell was my point?
Trigger warning. The Brainstorm podcast will criticize your most cherished beliefs. We attack nonsense in all its forms and discuss difficult subjects. If you peddle pseudoscience, supernatural woo, or religious dogma, then this is not your safe place. This is the home of hardcore skepticism.
Hi, and welcome to the Brainstorm Podcast. This is episode 50, and today is July 22nd, 2016. I'm Corey, and my panel tonight are Destin.
Hey.
Renee.
Hello.
And Leo.
Hey there.
With the always amazing Dave doing sound here in Roman Empire Studios.
That's me.
That's you. We're in Regina, Saskatchewan. Tonight's show is brought to you by Reasonist Inc., atheist, skeptic, and science-based apparel. You can find them at reasonistinc.com. Tonight's guest is Kevin Folta, professor and chairman of the Horticultural Sciences Department of the University of Florida, host of the Talking Biotech podcast, and outspoken advocate for biotech and favorite target of anti-GMO activists. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, nice to be here. Thank you.
So I guess we'll start off. You are a target, it seems, for anti-GMO activists. And you've recently had a break-in to your office.
Yeah, we had someone entered our office about 1 a.m. Eastern time back a couple Sundays ago. And they made a mess of the files. They went through desk drawers. And we know what was called an unknown device was connected to the computer at 1:30 a.m. So we don't know what was up or downloaded. We don't know what else happened. We're presuming they downloaded everything they could download, which they're not going to get a whole lot of much.
Right.
But, but really unfortunate because this is where this discussion is now led to. It's really sad.
It seems like quite an extreme reaction to, an extreme action based on a difference of viewpoint, actually.
Well, I think I'm making an assumption that it has anything to do with my visibility as a teacher and educator in the area of biotechnology. There's no evidence to that at all, other than it's never happened before. And we're assuming that, I've been getting kind of weekly Freedom of Information Act requests. I think the folks are frustrated they're not finding a smoking gun. So if you don't find one through the email records, which they now have 27,000 pages of email records, maybe they need – if you can't find it in the email records, well, then it must be somewhere else that we're not showing. And so they're so certain that I'm paid agent of biotechnology companies that this is where we're now playing.
The Monsanto shill.
Well, 27,000 pages of emails. That sounds like Clinton-level conspiracy stuff.
It's just a good week for me.
I was just going to say you should release the server in your basement.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of you have that one file hidden deep on your computer saying secret payments and marching orders from Monsanto. You got to have it very clear.
Yeah, I thought about all this stuff. I thought about putting some, really funny false stuff in there. Right after the first wave of FOIAs, I started to send emails to myself that had all the keywords in there that they were looking for, and then had things like, crashed saucer and, Bigfoot remains, like other things that were conspiratorial. Just so that people who were being entertained by reading through my emails and my personal correspondences would at least see that there's a human being that this is targeting, and someone with a sense of humor who really is on their side.
Yeah, it's
Recipe 47 for chemtrails.
Is that different than recipe 48
I don't know.
or 46?
Ask the expert.
Ask the expert.
20% less sodium.
Yeah, so
All
I was
natural.
going to ask you about those FOIA requests. Like, it seems like it never ends. Like, it's constantly new requests going up, and
Yeah, it is constant, and it started out really with one organization, and then they keep asking, like every few months they ask for more emails from different people. They're using Florida as kind of the weak spot, since we're the most loose laws with respect to freedom of information. We have the most transparency, we have the most lenient laws, and so they use me as a way to maybe get to other people, because if an email comes to my server and I don't even open it, but I'm CC'd in a group, now that gives them an inroads to reach all these other people. So that's what they're trying to do.
I see. It seems, I don't know, pretty roundabout or underhanded.
Well, the thing that's weird about it is that you the collateral damage that it causes to people who wanted nothing to do with this discussion, who sent me an email, asked me a question, the students who confided in me to help them with a question, that now became part of a public record, and now are in the hands of activists. And these are folks like with Vani Hari, for instance, the food babe.
Right.
She has some ridiculous number of emails from me because she's convinced that Monsanto pays me to go after her, which is nothing further than truth. But she asked about she got every email that says either the word Vani, V-A-N-I, or Hari, H-A-R-I. And one of the first emails she got in that queue was an email from a postdoc who wanted to work in my lab, who had nothing to do with GMOs or food, but was very interested in genomics research. And the person's postdoctoral advisor in Sri Lanka's first name was Hari. So now that record became something she received that when she makes public will open up this person who has nothing to do with me or her to ridicule, hassle, potentially the same kind of defamation they've done on me.
And is this kind of harassment, is it significantly harming any kind of research or other than taking up time?
It's hard to say. Like, to me personally, I've been a scientist, public scientist. I've worked for U.S. grants and state grants for 30 years. And so I have a pretty solid base of established work that doesn't have a whole lot to do with GMO food. It has nothing to do with commercialization of GMO food. So I've got a really solid reputation that allows me to weather this storm. The problem is that the opportunities I've lost have been like extension opportunities, like talking to audiences at colleges or extension personnel, meaning the people who train the farmers. I've had those events canceled because activists call universities and say, cancel the guy. I don't get invited to grade schools like I used to, where I was one of very few public scientists who was frequently working in the grade schools and helping teach kids. And it's always totally cool. And I love doing it. And now I've gotten one call in the last year, and I used to get them every month.
Oh, geez.
I think a lot. It's because some parents read about this shill from Monsanto who's coming to their classroom. And so this has implications.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and all that can do is dumb down the country. Like,
in a sense,
degrees,
if you're taking out scientists away from speaking to students, then
then young kids might not get exposed to crop science or to genetics at all, and not go in that direction and end up being politicians or something else that's useless, right?
Well, here's what makes it worse: is that what happens is that scientists see what happens to me. And then they say, there's no way that I will go take on this discussion because of what happened to Folta. And I just got back from the American Society of Plant Biology National Conference in Austin, Texas. And it was awesome. There were so, it's my biggest organization that I just adore the organization and the people who are like-minded, who almost unanimous on biotechnology and its strengths and limitations. And I had so many people come up to me and say, "Let me shake your hand. I feel so bad about what happened to you. There's no way I would ever get into a public debate now based on what I saw." And that is the last thing we need, is more scientists disengaging from public discourse.
Yeah.
It's almost the irony. It's almost an irony that, you know, you're scaring off people that have actual knowledge about this stuff based on a bunch of people that have absolutely or next to no knowledge about this stuff. Anytime I've seen anything by Food Babe, it's just kind of like, where are you getting your stuff from?
Well, yeah, it's
mission accomplished. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
That's what they're shooting for. The idea is that if you can take the people that actually have the knowledge and expertise in the area and take them from the conversation, it leaves more room open for the folks who don't have information, who just want to manufacture risk, who want to scare people from science and food. It gives them free range, and that's what they're trying to get.
Well, and it's a lot easier for the ignorant to get on a soapbox and to be understood by the masses who are also in that field ignorant. And you start throwing around catchphrases and words like shill or Monsanto or natural or anything like that. And it's so easy to just inflame the masses, where being rational and explaining that, you know, modifying the genome of a plant so that it requires less pesticides or less herbicides, they don't understand any of that.
Well, that's part of it, and I think scientists have to own a lot of that too, in that we haven't tried to teach people in the right way. We've tried to educate them with kind of the science fist a little bit, that we've said, you know, hey, you know, you don't get this. What's wrong with you? Anybody knows this. You know, we forget that people, that this is a complicated science with a very steep learning curve, and that we don't approach them as scientists. We approach them as critics, and we're giving them an unfair evaluation on this very dense science. So we've learned a lot about the communication of this in the last few years, and I think we're much more effective now than we were a few years ago.
So if you had to give somebody a 101, some person in the street, how would you explain to them in 5 minutes or less the science, digestible science behind GMO foods?
Well, that would be – so the old me would have told them about science and statistics and data. But the way that we have to do it now is by saying, you know, we're on the same page. My interest as a scientist, as a public scientist, I got into this business because I wanted to change things for people. And I wanted to feed hungry people and give people more choices in the industrialized world. I wanted to do things for agriculture, help farmers, and do all of this to help the environment. That's why I do what I do. Now, let me tell you about this technology that can help us achieve those goals.
Right.
And what does and now I don't have to. I didn't tell you anything about DNA. I didn't tell you about enzymes or Roundup or anything like that. What I told you was what makes me tick? What's my wiring? And that's all true. You know, all that is borne out very well by a 30-year career. You can look me up online and see that's what it's all been about for a long time. And then that gives us a platform. Now that we've established that we share the same concerns, I can tell you about the tools that I have from science that help us meet those concerns. It's a completely backwards way that we're teaching science now from where we were when we used to just say, listen, here's the data, here are the papers, here are the citations, go read this thick book, get back to me. You know, that's the way we used to operate, and it didn't work.
Well, you know, reading statistics is boring. Nice little memes and catchphrases work so much better.
Yep, it's much easier to operate in sound bites. And I think that we don't own emotion as scientists. We never did. We're taught to not speak with emotion. We're taught to let the data speak for themselves. And now as scientists, what we have learned to do is lead with our values, talk why we do what we do, and talk if we can bring in emotion. You know, talk about why the 21,000 children that will starve today.
Right.
Which, you know, and the kids, and all of it preventable, a lot of it preventable. how do we tie in with those kinds of realities that are happening around us, and show the science that we are so gifted to have, and that it give us so much abundance? How do we share this with the world? And those are concepts that resonate with any activist, and really do say we're on the same page.
And what I've noticed most I guess pro GMO or an anti GMO tend to come to the issue with like an attack manner, and that immediately causes divisiveness, like where people just want to fight right away instead of have a true conversation on the benefits or possible negative effects of anything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if somebody came to me and said, I don't know how to change my oil, I wouldn't hand him a manual and hit him with an oil filter wrench and say, "You idiot." It wouldn't be. You don't be combative about how you educate someone to take on a process. You show them where that oil filter is. You show them how to pull the drain plug. You show them how to put the grease around or the oil around the gasket of the filter and make sure it doesn't double gasket when you spin on the new one. You take people through the process, and once you do that and you empower them with the information, then they're very comfortable with moving forward and doing it on their own. In science, we don't do that. We as scientists in this area, we've always kind of felt that the knowledge we had was a currency that why we, sometimes in some ways kind of kept it guarded. Don't let people play in our space. But now we realize that we really do need to share it in order for it to work well.
Yeah, it seems like in the age of information, everybody is going to get information, and now you have to kind of appeal to them in some way so that they like yours more. Even if yours is factual and the opposing side isn't, you still have to appeal to that emotional side.
Or even,
no, you're exactly right.
People demand all the information, like, show me the stats, show me all the information. You give it to them, and then they're like, well, I'm not going to read that. That's too long. I'm still going to argue my side, even though you've presented everything against what I've said.
Yeah.
But you show them better. You show them one thing that goes against it. See?
Yeah.
Right, and then basically you really nailed it there. Show me something that confirms the bias that I have for what I already believe, right?
Yeah,
and this is consistent with a lot of topics you guys cover on your podcast. I'm going to shower myself in data that confirm what I believe and hide from the stuff that is against it. And that's the way most people are wired. Everybody has that confirmation bias. Scientists, on the other hand, and skeptics in general, we tend to say, challenge what I think I know. If I believe this is the case, I need to really check that. I need to make sure I'm not wrong. And people don't understand that that's how we roll as scientists. I don't want to make a mistake. And so it's kind of contrary to the way that we're taught in society these days to look at data.
Well, and the thing with confirmation bias is if you understand confirmation bias, you tend to avoid it.
Or try to, at least.
You tend to try. If you understand what it is, you try to avoid it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, in that way, I just recently read a couple of blog posts of yours, like your one that said you don't call yourself pro-GMO because it's an ideological stance rather than a scientific one.
That's right. I think that I'm a scientist, and I look at the data and I synthesize that data with my training and what I understand about experimental design, statistics, and the way the nuts and bolts of biology come together. And when I look at the synthesis of this as a whole, it's very clear that genetic engineering offers many more benefits than risks, and the limitations are very, very few versus the very good things that it can do. And so I wouldn't call myself pro-GMO. I talk about the things it doesn't do so well and the problems that come from it. But I'm absolutely – I don't believe the alarmist publications and the websites that say this is – sky is falling, we're all going to die from this stuff. It just isn't true.
Well, and in such a broad term, GMO, right? Obviously, you're pro drought resistance in plants, right? That's an actual specific thing you can be for. Being completely for or against GMO is like saying you're pro air. Or
Right. I stay away from the term GMO. I think it's an awful term. It was a term that was really spawned by a movement to turn off the average citizen, to give it a kind of a creepy factor. For me, this is genetic engineering. This is a way it's just like building engineering or bridge engineering or engineering a stent for a heart. It's precise planning, thinking, and coming up with a solution that we then can implement.
You mean you don't just put plants in a blender and throw in some Roundup and stuff and try to make a new plant? Sorry.
Yeah, well,
I'm the smart ass of the group.
No, that's cool. I wish it was so simple. It would make my life a lot easier. There's all these processes at this point are so ancient in terms of science. We're going back now to transform plants 35 years, 40 years, going on 40 years, and this technology in terms of science has been around basically forever. We really understand it well. It's improved so much, and that's the input side. The thing that's really cool is the output side. Once you've made the genetically engineered plant, how you can understand what's happening inside that plant, what's happening at the level of the gene and the proteins and the genes that are expressed. We can do so much with these technologies these days to really ask very pointy questions about, is it safe? Are there unexpected consequences? We can know that now, whereas we couldn't back in 1996 when these plants were first introduced.
I always loved walking into a grocery store and there's that lady with her tofu and she's putting her organic cauliflower and Brussels sprouts in her basket from the organic section. And I'm like, those aren't naturally made. That was selective breeding to make those plants in the beginning.
Yeah, and I get that point all the time. Is that when we mix together genes in 40,000 at a time in ways we don't understand, everybody's very happy with that. But if you add one gene you do understand, people get upset, and I've referred to that as the Frankenfood paradox. That even in E. coli, where we understand this organism extremely well, there still are 20 to 30% of the genes we have no idea what they do. And in plants, we're probably at about 50% that we're absolutely clueless. It gets better every day. But we have no problem mixing together plant genes with other plant genes in ways we don't understand. Nobody really cares.
Yeah, they've only been doing that for thousands of years. They call it husbandry.
And covering that all in cow poop. and then eating it, because that's the natural way to do it.
Or what's the other? Irradiating it and just letting it mutate on its own. And
Sure.
It's
been an extremely effective way to generate genetic variability, right? You damage the DNA with chemicals or radiation, and maybe you wreck a gene in a funny way, or knock off the end of a chromosome, or delete a chunk of a chromosome that gives you a trait that's beneficial. Scientists have been doing that since the 40s and 50s, and you find its finest products in your organic section. No problem.
Yeah, that's right.
So Saskatchewan is basically one giant grain farm, and pretty much 100% of that grain they use Roundup on it. So just to play the devil's advocate, are there any risks to the mass use of Roundup, to the extent where pretty much 100% of the agriculture is fumigated with Roundup a couple of times in the season?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there absolutely are risks. When you use one kind of strategy over and over again for pest control, so weeds or insect control, you're going to develop resistance to it. And that's what we see in many places, including Canada, is resistance to Roundup from weeds. And it happens with any herbicide. It happens over time when you have something that works well and you keep using it. it's become a nuisance in many areas of Saskatchewan, all the way through out into Manitoba, down into even in the States, certainly, to the point where some farmers are even abandoning Roundup-ready crops. They cost more as seed, and if you can't control the weeds, then why bother?
There's no benefit.
Right. And so that is definitely a risk. That's one really important downside of the technology, and something that we all predicted, something that we knew would happen and maybe took a little longer to happen than we would have thought. But still, the benefits of that, being able to control weeds with a very innocuous, safe compound, by far outweighed the risks associated with it.
And, well, I guess a follow-up question, is there any risk to human health in any way that you found with Roundup?
Well, and it's been so well researched. If you use it as directed, there is no evidence that there's any harm to human health. If you're using this stuff at the level of basically 750 milliliters per acre, which is something like 80 milligrams per square meter that you're spraying on very young plants. By the time it's there for a few weeks, the plants grow, they flower, they produce the crop, that stuff's gone, or at least very low levels.
Yeah.
And that's borne out when you do analysis of the final raw products. You might find, in some cases, parts per million on the crop, but on the raw crop. But then it's processed, and you're hard-pressed to find any of it actually going in the food.
Now, if you're only doing 750 mils per, if you're doing that big of an area, probably hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water.
Oh,
Now,
absolutely.
Following homeopathic science, doesn't that then become more dangerous? No, sorry.
That makes it stronger, right?
I actually thought you were going somewhere with that.
Super Roundup.
It's actually I actually think that I would not be surprised if you find this on the Natural News tomorrow morning.
Oh, no.
They even dilute their Roundup.
Yeah. Way to go, Gumby.
Well, if that actually works, I bet my parents would be very happy, because that would mean that they would not need to purchase so much Roundup. They could just buy 1 liter and then use it almost infinitely.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
It is actually interesting. If you look on PubMed or Google Scholar and you look up Roundup poisoning or glyphosate poisoning, you can find explicit cases where people have actually drank the concentrate. And, because, it happens here and there. Farmers, there's a relatively high level of suicide and, throughout the world. And they drink a liter of Roundup concentrate, which is like a 42% glyphosate. And they wake up in the hospital with a stomach ache. It's a reasonably innocuous compound that I think somewhere on maybe 10 to 20% of people who try to kill themselves with it succeed. It's not the best move if you're going to try to do that.
Well, we actually I reached out a couple times to, I can't remember his name, at the U of S.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
actually he's one of the scientists that really worked on glyphosate.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either. Professor at the University of Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like he's one of the leads in that whole field of
It's really warm in the studio,
smart.
so his brain just stalled.
I promise we're smart.
It does that sometimes. My brain just stops.
I promise.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, I should know who you're talking about, but it doesn't ring. I can't pull it out right now.
I'll just look it up really
I
quick.
just recently read, it was a few months ago, we read an article by him in the Western Producer. So,
Yes. Yeah, I can picture him. I can't. He's an emeritus professor, I think, who worked quite a bit on Roundup, and his article went on to talk about the safety and dosage and the amount that you would have to consume in order to cause problems. It is really important because people do get confused, because you can find plenty of reports that show deleterious effects on things like cells in a dish. And even cells in a dish are hard to kill. You can't kill them with glyphosate, but you can kill them with Roundup.
Or shotgun.
Roundup is What
or
was
a
it?
shotgun.
Or a shotgun.
or shotgun. That's true. The Roundup is the glyphosate chemical that inhibits very specific metabolic processes in plants, but it also has a surfactant. So this compound that's like a detergent that helps it penetrate the leaves. And cells in a dish hate detergent.
Yep, for sure.
So there's the other side of genetically engineered plants that I always hear is the transgenic ones that repel insects. So there's the common argument, they produce their own poison to repel the insects, therefore you don't have to use insecticides. So I guess the same question what are the negative aspects of that technology, and I guess the risks and dangers?
Okay, so once again, the negative side is the resistance. It's a wonderful strategy and it works great. And if you don't have to spray insect control, your plants are protecting themselves from the pests that feed on them. Think about that for a minute. It only is protecting itself from the insects that feed on it. So all of the other beneficials, all the other stuff that's just around a canola or a cornfield or a cotton field, they're just fine. But if you eat the plant that's engineered, you die, which is great. The problem is, again, that you're seeing some resistance popping up here and there. Again, though, the technology itself is awesome. The insecticide itself is a protein, and it's a protein it comes from a bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis. That's why they call it BT toxin, and it's toxic to caterpillars that feed on things like corn or bollworms and cotton. It's a it's a protein. It works by binding a very specific molecule in the gut of caterpillars and causes them some problems in their stomachs. Humans don't have the same mechanisms of digestion, nor do any mammals, for that matter. So this compound, this BT, is one of the safest compounds around. It's been used in organic cultivation for ages, and just was adopted by being able to synthesize it in a plant. It's rather brilliant. It works really well. Hopefully, we'll be able to keep ahead of the technology or ahead of the resistance by continuing to hone those proteins to make them effective against future generations of insects.
And that professor's name is John Giese.
Wait a minute. Say that again.
John Giese.
Oh, John Giese. Okay, I thought you said John Gacy. I was thinking that's the guy who was
John Wayne Gacy.
I don't. The only thing he did was round up kids.
Yeah. He did some different kinds of experiments. But.
That was the only roundup he did was rounding up. Yeah,
that's right.
The only roundup he did was in a primer gray van.
Yeah, well, wearing a clown costume.
Well, I had a couple specific questions about the stuff you've been working on.
Sure.
Namely in strawberries.
Okay.
And it's kind of a personal thing with my wife because she's allergic to strawberries. And we're not sure if it's a dust on them, if it's something in the seed, if it's something in the actual plant, because she doesn't really want to experiment with different types of strawberries to find out which ones are more or less likely to kill her. But what do you think the most common? Would you have any idea of the most common cause of things in plants that do cause allergic reactions? And is there a way to work those out of plants?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. The one in strawberry, the major allergen is called FRA1C or something. It's a protein that's involved in pigment synthesis. So it's actually involved in the red color that strawberries accumulate. It's one of the enzymes that helps enhance that process. And that was sorted out a few years ago. That's the major strawberry allergen. Now, there are ways that you can suppress that using genetic engineering. The better example might be from peanuts or wheat, where we know that for years now you've been able to suppress the seed storage proteins in peanut and also the glutens, which are the gliadin and glutenin in wheat. There's a number of laboratories that have worked on this and done it already, but you just don't see those products in the store because, the folks with allergies are a pretty small little nodule of humans, and to have to go through the testing and regulation, deregulation.
Well, sure, the economics don't work for sure.
Right. I mean, it's better to hand out a few EpiPens and let the chips fall where they may, which I think is a shame. I think if you have the capacity to create hypoallergenic products that save one life, why don't we do it?
Yeah, it seems like that's the right way to go, the ethical way to go.
And it's probably just a matter of time. I mean, this technology has been around for a couple of years now with the peanuts and the wheat, and in a decade or so, we might have people who specifically plant this kind of product to fill that demand.
At least for wheat, like everybody's gluten allergy, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh. Allergic to the glutens.
Allergic to the glutens.
I had a gluten once.
Well, there's some very nice ways that people are using the new technologies called gene editing, this thing they call CRISPR-Cas9. And if you haven't heard of CRISPRs, you'll hear about it going forward. CRISPR. It stands for something, I don't know, I even know what the acronym stands for. But the idea is simple. It's basically being able to very selectively edit individual bases of DNA. So the A's, G's, C's, and T's that form the gene, the long string of letters, you can actually change a letter in there like a word processor. Change an A to a T or a G to a C or eliminate a few letters. This technology is brand new, smoking hot, and but yet being used everywhere. It's being adopted by everybody because it allows you to make changes at the level of the gene, but you don't leave any evidence. I shouldn't say that. Leave any hardware laying
There's
around the cell.
There's some Monsanto stuff coming out right there.
Well, I just said something that could be horribly misinterpreted.
Yeah.
And here's a quote where he said, "You don't leave evidence behind. Make it like it's a crime scene."
Yeah. I'm thinking someone's going to really take that soundbite and just do some creative editing themselves.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, and don't think it hasn't happened already. It was like that. It was like that episode when Homer had the gummy bear stuck on the babysitter, and he if you don't know the reference, look it up on YouTube. Yeah. But the idea was, you can use this gene editing process to be able to selectively make very small boutique changes, and people are doing that in wheat right now, just to mutagenize the parts of the protein that cause the allergenicity. So you'll still have structurally solid proteins that work well in giving the bread the structure and rigidity that it needs in order to have the proper, foaming that it does, but won't have the allergic reaction.
So, apart from the Cas9, what are new and up and coming technologies that'll start coming out in the next couple of years? Like, what are new things that are being discovered that we'll hear about in the coming years?
Well, CRISPR-Cas9 is really has stolen the show. It's really the mechanism. It's kind of the new tool that we'll use to solve problems. But the thing that you'll see lots more of in the next few years are really a leaning towards changing genetics, whether it's by traditional breeding, whether it's by traditional, genetic engineering techniques, or by gene editing. You're going to see more of a favoring of consumer-oriented products. So, in other words, Roundup Ready and BT help the farmer. Consumers never see it. Really, they just keeps their prices low. What you're looking at in terms of the consumer, you're starting to see things like allergenicity, hypoallergenic products, higher nutrition, more flavors and colors. You'll see things that'll help add value to that final product that the consumer picks up. I think that'll be those will all be very welcome.
So, like the one question I had written down, so you'll actually be able to make eggplant taste good.
I
At
can
some
make
point.
eggplant taste good by cooking it right.
Yeah.
You just have to make it like you're from India or make it from Spain. I mean, every time the trick is getting out of North America.
Yeah.
The only place I've had bad eggplant is in Canada and U.S. If you go
You just
to
boil it and cover it in salt. What else do you do?
No, they make it in Spain where they cover it with like a cornstarch and an egg wash and then put a cane syrup reduction on it. Totally kills.
Nice.
But
Just kidding. I'm a foodie. I love all food. As long as it's good.
I don't eat eggplant.
yeah, me too. Well, this is what's totally awesome is and this is why we can get excited about genetic engineering as foodies is it's going to allow higher quality food for those of us who are in very privileged industrialized world where we may have stuff that lasts longer, performs better, tastes better. That's huge. But the thing that gets me excited is when people in other parts of the world will have access to the things we have, the food that we take for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are in Canada. Like, can you imagine when poutine makes its way to the, you'll be able to get potatoes over in, certain areas of the world where you currently can't. I say that just kind of jokingly. I do think there's a lot of things we have, like high value, high nutrition greens, the orange vegetables. Those kinds of things, when they make their way to other parts of the world, may be significant, and that gets me pretty excited.
Well, and you'll be able to increase protein values in certain plants and the like caloric densities and actually make things more
Nutritious?
Yeah, more.
Is that the word?
Well,
Not to put a word in.
nutritionally dense.
Right.
So that, like, right now there's golden corn that helps people not go blind. That's good. Yeah, I'm all about
Or is
kids
it
not going
golden
blind.
rice?
Golden rice.
Yeah,
sorry.
golden rice.
There's golden corn too, but golden corn you can increase the beta carotene through genetic engineering. But there's also strains of corn that do produce beta carotene, and to breed those lines into lines that are helpful for people in corn they actually will eat. Corn is pretty gross stuff. The stuff we grow for cattle doesn't taste the best, but there are plenty of ways for us to engineer food to make it more, like you say, more nutrient dense. And maybe the best example is cassava. And 800 million people. So what is that? One out of 9 people, 8 people eat cassava on a day in and day out basis. And most people in the Western world don't even know what it is. But it's a big starchy root that grows under a plant. And it has very good value in terms of filling starch, carbohydrate, but very little protein. And new types of cassava are being engineered to have high levels of protein to help balance the diet of the many people that consume it.
And that's also one of those crops that is largely eaten by, I guess, poorer countries like South American countries and African countries where it's consumed a lot. So it has the benefit of, helping people who already have maybe a harder time getting nutritious food to be able to grow something that is somewhat similar to the golden rice a couple of decades ago.
No, that's exactly right. Cassava, banana, rice, these are all world food staples that are not rich in vitamins and nutrients in their native state. Yet they've all been targets for engineering by folks like Gates Foundation and by traditional breeding too. Traditional breeding is still very important, and using every tool we can use to increase the amount of things like beta carotene, vitamin B6, protein, iron, and virus resistance. These are all really important traits to be genetically engineering into these crops because we can't do it just by traditional breeding fast enough. Mark Linus, I saw him last month, and he told me about places he's been in, I think it's in Uganda or Kenya, where the banana crop is failing. People don't have the food that they need, yet behind the barbed wire fence, there are beautiful plants that are genetically engineered. And why people can't have this yet, this is a tragedy. mean, these are crops that are growing and doing just fine. Yet it's the fear that's being fomented by Greenpeace and other organizations on the ground in these countries that limit the dissemination of those crops to the people that need them.
It's funny. I spent a lot of time. I used to live in Panama, and I spent quite a bit of time in Costa Rica, which is where Chiquita moved to. And it was hilarious because not hilarious. It's actually pretty pathetic. But we this one plantation, they were just picking bananas off of the plants, right? And they were going in from the same plants into different baskets, different colored baskets. And some of the baskets were the organic baskets, but everything came off the same plants. There, it's just marketing in most situations, right? And the fact that like the banana is a perfect example because it can't exist in nature on its own. It has no reproductive ability as a plant, right? The banana as we eat it, not as it is in nature. But.
Right. The Cavendish banana, the one that we enjoy as a dessert banana, that thing is reasonably fragile, and it goes through a lot of controls for pesticides and pests, fungus and pests. There's a lot of diseases that like to take out bananas. Luckily, there's a genetic engineering solution for every one of them. I'm not sure how you grow organic bananas. It would have to take an awful lot of stuff like copper and other appropriate organic controls. I'm not sure how easy that would be.
Well, I lived in Colombia for a number of years, and I was working with agricultural development projects, and we did actually grow organic bananas with some of the communities native bananas that were around, but it was pretty difficult. But we had to grow organic ones because none of the genetically modified ones were available in that area, like none. But there was a lot of problems with fungus and other insects.
Yeah, I guess we have to be real clear about whether it's genetic modified or genetic engineered. There hasn't been any genetically engineered bananas released yet. They exist everywhere in terms of research crops, but none have been released for human consumption. Just the bred bananas, the ones that have been conventionally bred for seedlessness and for high yields and resistance to disease, those exist. And things like the Cavendish banana, those are probably I know those are grown on the plantations throughout Central America. But there are many, many other varieties. There's like 1,500 varieties of bananas,
right?
And so many different flavors, and very, very cool to explore bananas.
And they're all disgusting.
No, actually, when you get it fresh from the plant, it tastes nothing like the crap we get.
But I was very surprised. I saw purple bananas.
Oh yeah,
like,
is that right?
Yeah, I had no idea before I moved to Colombia that was a thing. Like completely purple bananas. I was like, that's pretty
There's also
cool.
bananas you eat like potatoes.
Or like potatoes you had mentioned?
Plantains. Love plantains.
Yeah, or the green cooking bananas. Those are the ones that people eat in the developing world predominantly. Again, it's a very good source of starch. If you ever can find green cooking bananas, which are similar to plantains, but there also are plantains. But the green cooking bananas are fantastic. When you boil the banana, you peel off the peel, you chop it into pieces, cook it with spices, and it's really great. It's like a really good tasting potato.
Okay, I haven't had that then. I'll have to try that out.
I would argue that it tastes better than potatoes. I definitely like it better.
I don't
than
know.
potatoes.
I'm Irish. I like potatoes.
Hey, I'm Canadian. I also like potatoes, but
Well, you could cover the bananas in gravy and give that a shot.
Cheese.
I think a plantain poutine would be
Yeah,
nice.
plantain poutine.
nice.
They actually have plantains at the grocery stores here once in a while. I might have to grab some. They don't taste as good, obviously. They never do.
Well, let them get real ripe,
Yeah.
and when they get almost turn black, and then when you peel them, you take out the gooey thing in the middle. Just throw it in some oil and just fry it, and it gets real soft. Eat it with rice and chicken and rice. It's fantastic.
Nice. This is Cooking with Kevin Folta.
People say I look like Alton Brown sometimes.
Nice.
I'm actually excited for what we're going to see in the next couple decades for new and exciting foods to come out. I'm just always looking for new stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the only thing is, like, I mean, getting ready for this podcast, I'll admit I didn't know much about GMOs or any of that. So I Netflix, watched a couple of the documentaries that are on there, and of course, they're the most scary ones out there. I watched one that was like called GMO OMG, and and the only thing is from your point of view, what do you think is the key argument? Like, why is all these people so paranoid about this? Because apparently, all the scientific studies into this is doing good things, but yet they're all wanting just strictly nature. What do you think feeds that paranoia that's obviously out there?
Food babe.
Yeah.
Well, it can't be just her, but
the funny part is that the people who are saying those things wouldn't know nature if it bit them in the butt. I mean, it's natural. Nature put plants on this planet that would never survive in cultivation, that had very little food value for humans. Humans domesticated wild weeds. We took shrubs, we took weeds, we took trees, and on purpose or not, created conditions where they could grow. And then we selected the best stuff every generation. Natural is there is no such thing. And why do these people say the things they do? I don't know. I think that there's a few people who are making a good living off of scaring the hell out of others. And whether it's Food Babe, Dr. Oz, Jeff Smith, any of these folks, they go after they've created a narrative that, again, confirms the biases of what people want to believe. That there's people out there who for 100 years have said we're being poisoned by corporations, and they play into that, and it's a very compelling narrative. It fits what they believe, and that's what it is. It's crazy. There's not any evidence that supports it, and unfortunately, the people it hurts are farmers and the poor.
So what you're saying is you're not secretly developing giant killer tomatoes that are going to take over the planet?
Well, if I was, it wouldn't be secret. If I told you that,
then you'd have to kill me. There's always that catch.
The funny part is that if I could develop giant killer ones, I could just develop giant ones first. I think there's so many cool things that we can do. And that's the funny part, is that the traits that really are the ones that will make a difference are just that one vitamin.
Right.
The plant that can survive 4 hours of freezing or a couple hours of drought, or heat stress just for a day. We don't need big giant changes to make a tremendous difference for people.
Or that doesn't rot
really
4 days after it's picked. Or like the avocado doesn't go bad 3 seconds after you cut it open.
Right.
Because that's not a long window.
No, those things are all coming. I mean, can you imagine if you had guacamole that would last for a week?
Instead of 2 hours.
I could get behind that. Or but there's a lot of things that are theoretically possible that are on drawing boards all over every university on this planet. Yet we're really bridled by the fact that we can't release things on a timely basis, if at all. Universities have been taken out of this equation since the papaya.
Well, luckily you guys will have Donald Trump leading the country soon, and he's very pro science. I'm
he's
sure.
pro something. I'm sure.
Like if he gets behind it, he'll be the best at it. And
I guess you kind of segued into what I was going to ask the next question. But so in terms of the political side of it, there are several European countries that are kind of moving towards or talking about like the banning GMOs and or the biotech stuff. How do you see that going forward? What is your prediction? I guess that's question one, and then what's the impact of that of countries getting behind the anti-GMO movement?
Okay, I'll answer that in a couple different ways. So, one of the interesting things to think about is Romania, and back in 1998, 1999, Romania was, for years, they've been an emerging economy inside Europe, inside Eastern Europe. And they really were changing from net importers of things like potatoes and soy to exporters. And the reason was BT potatoes. So they had BT potatoes in late 90s, early 2000s, and they were cutting insecticides. They were producing potatoes for export and using Roundup Ready soy. Things were going well. 2007, they had to stop using it because they joined the EU. And then they went back to being a high user of insecticides, a net importer of potatoes and soy. So countries can do very well by taking on the best agricultural technologies. The European Union, for a long time, has banned GM crops for use in food without labels. Spain grows GM corn. Many countries grow it, but they can only grow certain varieties that were approved in the 1990s. So Spain, Portugal, maybe a little bit, but mostly Spain. They grow quite a bit of GM corn. All of the EU countries that have cattle feed them GE corn and soy. And they are the biggest importers from the biggest export market for Brazil and Argentina is probably China and the EU. So they import plenty of GMO crops. They absorb the benefits from them. They just don't approve new varieties for use for their farmers to go into their food supply for humans. So, the second part of your question was, so what's happening now is they last year decided that every country should have autonomy in making up its own mind about what they're going to do about GM crops. So instead of there being an EU consensus that dictates everything, if Germany wants to do it, they can do it. If Scotland says we don't want it, they can say we don't, and that's what they did last year. I just met with Northern Ireland's Parliament a few weeks ago, and we had a wonderful conversation about how they could actually benefit from it, and it was very well received.
I know I had started a list. I had gotten a list of all the countries that have banned or restricted GM crops for use for human consumption. And I was trying to research other things that are banned in those countries. And a lot of the countries that have banned GM foods are also the countries that ban, women from voting, that women from driving, voting. A lot of them are so backwards socially, economically, and at the base level of technology that it's no wonder they're afraid of what they consider Frankenfood because they can't even understand the modern socioeconomic and political scene of the world. And there's just a lot of regression.
I would somewhat disagree with that correlation. I'm
just saying that.
There is a correlation. There are some countries that are very underdeveloped economically and have pretty bad political situations that do ban genetically modified stuff. But I would not say that there's a direct link. Because you have very developed countries
like Norway.
Sure.
Yeah,
but what I'm saying is when there's people saying, well, there's 67 countries that ban it. Yeah, but only 4 of them belong to the modern world, right? or 6 or 7. Only those countries
just throwing
know
numbers
what it
out
is. Yeah, well, I don't have it with me, so I'm just saying it's about that many. Those are the only countries that actually know what this stuff is.
Well, I think there's only one country at this time that has a total ban, and that's, I think it's either Peru or Ecuador. I always get those two confused. But part of the idea is that this is the cradle of domestication, or center of origin, I should say, for potatoes and tomatoes. And I think that's their major driver for why they want to keep genetically engineered crops out of that country. Everybody else who had bans has softened them up to at least things like importation for cattle feed. Or Kenya is a great example. They had an all-out ban a few years ago, but now are growing GE cotton. And one of the interesting things about that is the chemical companies go into Kenya and say, we will pay the farmers to not grow GE cotton because we're not selling so much chemistry anymore.
Everybody's
that
nodding
makes
their
sense.
head.
That makes
This
sense.
is an audio podcast, eh?
Yeah. Well, I was just the only thing is that I find that funny because I like I said, I watched this GMO documentary on Netflix. Yeah, yes, I wasted an hour of my life, but the funny thing is they're making a connection between genetically modified, like the organism, and that they're a direct link to, pesticide companies, which I find that kind of funny that that they would be going in saying, no, don't use that because we want you to use more of our spray, But
Yeah, well, but that's the big problem. Is a lot of the companies that develop these things are or were chemical companies. So BASF is probably the biggest chemical company doing this, or Dow and Dow, DuPont and Pioneer. These were chemical companies that made agricultural chemicals that really realized there was more money to be made in the seeds, and so they started either a parallel agricultural practice in seed technology, or in some cases selling a package of here's the seeds, here's the chemicals that we recommend for them. And that's the big objection with Monsanto. I mean, right now they are predominantly a plant biology company. They sold off their chemical divisions back in the 90s, and I think today everything in their chain is now under Pfizer. They still sell glyphosate for Roundup, but I think that's really the only chemical they sell. But I'm no expert in their products.
Monsanto is big pharma.
but in
all by themselves.
On that topic, so one of the big objections to genetically modified organisms and the whole biotech industry is that there's such a monopoly on the technology, and that people can get sued for replanting some of the seeds, like because of the strict patents. What is your viewpoint on patents and the length at which they can be held, and how that affects small farmers who may be affected by having to buy new seeds and the monopoly on the seeds?
Well, it doesn't. That's a tough one for me because I absolutely adore the fact that we can patent protect plants and innovation in genetic improvement. I work in a department where we have breeders, not genetic engineering, where we have plant breeders, crossing plant A with plant B like people have done for millennia, improving strawberries, citrus, tomatoes, blueberries, horticultural crops that are not GMOs. But every one of those is patented. Because for us to come up with a citrus tree that's resistant to a disease or produces a better juice, that might cost $5-10 million. To make a new strawberry variety is probably $1 million. When you look at, you have to plant tens of thousands of millions of plants to find that one that's a real winner. That costs lots of land charges, labor, fertilizer, water. I mean, it is very expensive to make better plants so that we can keep eating. And if we had to create that one plant and then give it away, the only way that we can do it is by having nurseries. You patent that material, have nurseries blow it up for you, and then sell it to farmers every year who are happy to buy an improved crop because this way they're guaranteed they get the newest and best. And that's more money for them. And then a little bit of that dribbles back to the university to fuel and continue the breeding program. The same thing happens in industry. It costs a fortune to make and deregulate these plants. And the only way that you can ensure future innovation is to incentivize it for a company to make a buck when they produce something that farmers use.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
And so, and do you see some kind of future where there's less of a monopoly and maybe more of a government-sponsored open source type arrangement where government grants are given and then the seeds are, the technology is free? Or
Sure. I mean, I could imagine that, and that would be really cool in my book. The problem is that the people who are against the technology have made the regulations so difficult that only the companies can navigate it. And so what's ended up happening is that, and believe me, the companies are happy to have it that way. So So people say we don't want this to just go. We don't want this just to be an easy trip to get new products cleared. There has to be all this rigorous testing, and in the States and in Canada it's even worse. The testing is extremely rigorous, and that keeps a guy like me out. But it only allows the big companies to play in that space.
So it's almost like the extreme reaction, the anti-activists have increased the corporate influence on the industry.
Exactly.
So we could summarize that all the anti-GMO militants they're actually working for Monsanto indirectly.
They're the shills.
That's right.
Well, I think that's a very good interpretation. Their actions empower the larger companies to do what they do. They can squeeze out the small companies from ever operating in that arena. And as you see more and more consolidation, which I don't necessarily like, I think I'd like to see smaller companies being able to compete against the Monsantos and Dows with better products coming out of universities. But it's such an arduous road that there's no way it can happen.
It's almost like if there was a freer market, it would be better for smaller people.
So do you see a point in the far future where this is going to be my last question?
Yes.
Where there will be where I'd be able to get a CRISPR Cas9, is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Version of like a 3D printer where I could be like, hey, I want to grow a lemon tree that's going to survive -45 weather.
With a 3D printer?
Well, no, but that's what I mean. Like a point in the future where you'll be able to actually customize your own plants at home, your own seeds.
I don't know that it's going to be like that anytime soon, but I do see CRISPR-Cas9 as being the thing that breaks the stranglehold of big companies. Because now if universities – because CRISPR-Cas9 won't require the regulatory oversight in all likelihood that current transgenic technologies do. That CRISPR-Cas9, the plant itself, the DNA, looks exactly the same as traditional breeding. You can't tell the difference. You can't tell if it happened because of a radiation damage, whether it was a photon from the sun, whether it was who knows. You can't tell the difference. So that way it breaks the stranglehold of corporations. Maybe that'll be reality very soon.
And for any listeners that are curious, CRISPR means clustered, regularly interspaced short, palindromic repeats.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
Well,
that clears it up nicely.
CRISPR.
I now understand.
for the layman.
Well, there's a lot
I
of good
Googled it, so I'm
YouTube
an expert.
No, there's lots of good videos on YouTube about it, and really the clustered interspersed repeats, that just has to do with how this was originally identified in bacteria. So it's I just call it CRISPR. People know what you're talking about.
Cool. I think we're out of time. We need to go to a break. Thank you very much for your time. This was
Okay.
I didn't say much, but I learned a lot, I think.
Well, it was a pleasure. It was a lot of fun and a great way to spend the night. So thank you so much, you guys.
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would we be able to
Right.
bring you on next year or the year after if you come up with any new killer tomatoes or,
Tobacco.
tomatoes, intelligent
Well,
strawberries?
if I can plug the podcast, that would be wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. Plug your podcast.
Can I do that real quick?
And
Yeah,
your-
so I do the Talking Biotech podcast. It's at talkingbiotechpodcast.com. We cover a lot of these topics like domestication and where your food comes from in time and space, and also what are some of the really neat new tricks in terms of genetic engineering in crop plants and animals. So that's what we do.
Very cool. And you have a blog as well, right?
Sure, it's called Illumination. That's you just Google Illumination blog with my name on it. You'll find that. And do a lot of talking all over the place. I'll be speaking in Saskatoon in December. So
Oh, geez.
Oh,
really?
I have to go up.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
Did not know that.
Maybe we'll come up and try to get a live interview.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do that. Yeah, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from Regina, right?
For sure, yeah.
So Illuminati, Monsanto,
Killer tomatoes.
Killer tomatoes.
Okay, got it.
I didn't think about that for about a year after I had it up. Thanks a lot, guys.
It was fun. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you.
very much. Okay, let's go to a break.
If you like what we're doing and want to help us keep the lights on, go become a patron at patreon.com/brainstorm podcast. You can hear the bonus half hour that we record every episode and get a shout out when you support the show. Become a patron for just $1 an episode at patreon.com/brainstorm podcast. Or you can support the show by ordering a t-shirt, mug or other gear from our store at caffeepress.ca/brainstorm podcast gear. If you can't afford to become a patron or buy gear, then why not give us a rating or write a review on iTunes or Stitcher? Every rating makes it easier for people to find us. Thanks for your support.
We are given one life, full of billions of small and large decisions. To be somebody, to change, to be kind, to give hope, to become a better person, and to leave a lasting impact on this planet. It is a decision to be made every single day while your heart is still beating. We've made our decision. Absence of Clothing, atheist and science-based apparel and merchandise, donating 50% of our profits to charity. Look good and feel good, without God. Check us out at absenceofclothing.com and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest for discount codes and other sweet swag.
Use the code BRAINSTORM at absenceofclothing.com and get 10% off.
What's up, secular minorities? This is Uber47, host of the Secular Barbershop Podcast, a podcast run by a secularist of color for secularists of all colors. I invite you to come in, relax, and listen in on a conversation that changes every week in a secular environment. And, like every barbershop, walk-ins are welcome. Talk to you soon.
I think that
Welcome
promo's
back
over.
to Roman Empire Sweat Lodge.
Jesus, eh? It's hot in here. That was a fantastic interview.
Fantastic.
I just want to say that was probably our only one that has ever stayed on topic the entire time we've been running this show.
We managed to even keep the smartassery on topic.
Yes, even the smartassery was on topic.
Your Richard Carrier interview stayed on topic.
Well, that's true.
That's because he talked the entire
time. Yeah, nobody else got a word in edgewise, but that's what...
Well, Michael Sherlock was like that a lot, too.
Yeah. The first one, the first one was like
Second
that.
one wasn't,
No. All right, let's do a woo report.
I'm not a scientist, but if I can tell you your science sucks, then your science really sucks.
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit. Fuck.
God damn
Don't
it.
forget to mute your device.
I did mute my device. For some reason, it's an asshole. You're an asshole.
Well, you're worried about tomatoes getting sentience now that your iPhone is your cell phone.
All right, Renee, what's your story?
Emotional freedom technique.
Emotional freedom technique?
Yeah, also known as tapping.
What does that mean?
Basically, it's a technique started in the 90s by a guy called Gary Craig. What it's based on is acupuncture, so similar chi meditation lines. So what you do, it's a way of helping you cope with anxiety, depression, and stuff like that there.
Stuff like that there.
Yeah, don't you know?
Hey, don't you know?
So basically, their idea.
The show just went to shit.
We lost the guest.
We spent all of our intelligent, energy on that. But so basically, the idea is energy flows in the body, and strong emotions or trauma can cause blockages. Tapping releases this energy, and so the more simple version of it is like stuff like. Basically, you find these chi points that are similar to acupuncture, except instead of poking yourself with needles, you just tap. And it's usually followed also with like an affirmation. an example they gave in this Vice.com article is that you start with they call it tapping on the karate chop part of the hand, so basically the blade of the hand, and I can't remember the exact affirmation, but it's along lines of I'm very stressed out, and but I will overcome. Something along those lines. I can't remember the exact thing, but like you just sit there and you tap and do say this affirmation.
I'm good enough. I'm strong enough.
Yeah, exactly. That's what as I was reading the articles, this Stuart Smalley thing. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough.
I'm a good person. Darn it, people like me.
And then smack yourself on the forehead.
So is this stuff rooted in, I guess, East Asian mythology of sorts, or is
what? They say that it's based in acupuncture. They use the similar qi meditation, similar idea that energy flows and that this tapping releases these energies. So when you're really stressed out, you can tap and whatever.
They don't mention what that energy means, do they?
No, not really. They don't really go into that. Even though there are I found a couple YouTube videos where they're teaching you these techniques,
right?
And it gets even more wooey than that.
Oh,
there's one video like right in the article where it's not only just tapping to release the chi energy and for relaxation, which, you know what? If that's all it was, like you're stressed out and so you're tapping your forehead instead of rubbing your temples, like whatever, who cares? But it gets into stuff like you start tapping to get it deeper into your cells and releasing genetic memories, and, this is how you can improve your life, and it gets really, really wooey.
That's interesting.
Did they talk
memories
about energy healing and stuff like that too with it?
Yeah, there was healing. Like that was, I think, with the deeper tapping and
So you can do deep tapping for energy and for soul healing.
There's way of tapping for better money too.
So would you be doing certain tapping for sexual healing?
That's actually
I know
never
that
not tapping. I know that works.
Yeah. Okay, I think what you're confusing here is tapping with rubbing.
Hey, to each his own.
Yeah. See, I was actually kind of surprised because usually when you come across this kind of stuff, there's usually a sexual component. There's almost always a sexual component, and reading this article, they didn't cover that at all.
Well, with all these new things, one thing that I always notice when it comes to new woo of this sort, they always try to enter into realms that we don't quite understand like completely. So they'll use neuroscience and say, they'll mention the cell names of in your brain, and then they'll say this makes those cells more active.
Yeah, they adopt terminology to give what they're talking about credibility.
Yeah.
The other thing that I found funny, like looking at this, is I was amazed how many YouTube videos there are. Like there's one I forgot her name, and it's way too hot. My brain is totally dying.
Yeah, we're warm in here.
But Gabriel something. It's right in the article, but like she's got like a whole series of how to improve your life by tapping on various parts of your body, and it's just I just found it quite humorous. And the only other thing I found funny, and it just instantly popped in my brain, and typing it into Google, I wasn't the only one, is that this sounded a lot like plexing from Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah.
It's like I put it into Google, and it's like, is plexing a real thing? And then it instantly goes to links.
Goes through tapping.
It goes to this EFT, yeah.
So the nerds finally have their own pseudoscience.
Well, I'm kind of curious because if this guy started this in the 90s.
This is Renee's particular speciality.
Yes.
In nerddom.
In nerddom, this is my thing. But if this started in the 90s, I'm wondering if this guy didn't watch that specific Star Trek episode and went, I'm going to make a thing.
Yeah.
That seems legit.
That seems
I'm
legit.
totally going to start that.
Can you tap too much? Can you be like, you've gone too far with tapping?
It's like anything. If you enjoy it too much, you will go blind.
Yeah.
I don't know. They never actually said that, but
I guess if you're tapping your eyes.
Don't tap your eyes.
And is there a certain like PPSI you're supposed to reach? Are you supposed to be able to monitor how hard you're tapping? Like
Well,
full
I think-
fisting, tapping.
I don't think you're supposed to do full fisting unless you enjoy it.
No, but like
You never go full fist.
could I say like, no, I'm into this tapping thing. I wasn't punching him in the face. I was just trying to cheer him up.
That's right.
Well, you could try it and see if it holds up in court.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, they do say it's tapping, not punching.
but tapping with a fist, it's still tapping. You tap you
really,
with a 2x4.
really hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard taps. No, I think the harder it gets, the less tap it is.
Yeah. It's kind of like you poke with a needle. That's acupuncture. You stab them with a knife.
That's no longer
That is no
acupuncture.
longer acupuncture.
It's extreme acupuncture. It's a new thing.
It's extreme.
Makes me think of my daughter on the playground last night. She's like standing with just her feet on two beams and she holds her hands up. I'm extreme. I'm like, no, you're not. You're unsafe.
No, both are true.
You're unsafe. That's not extreme. No, stop.
I lost it.
But ultimately, these kind of things, like if it gives you some, like it's like any of this other kind of wooey stuff. Like if you're having a bad day and you want to tap yourself on the forehead and it makes you feel better, go hard.
Right.
It's just that when you start thinking that it does more than that, it's
or
woo.
even if you start telling other people to do that.
Well,
instead.
yes,
Like,
because
that's-
I mean, in the article, it's they were talking about UK and GP general practitioners, so obviously it's a British article, but they've had some doctors who leave their general practice to go and teach this shit, and this is where
Right.
I think it gets dangerous.
I think the doctors that are drawn away from actual medicine for that type of stuff, I think by
They're failing.
removing themselves from medicine, they're better serving the community.
Maybe
By no longer practicing medicine.
Maybe that's that. Well, that's the problem is then they go on Dr. Oz though, and then they make way more money, and more people buy into the
Yeah, it
bullshit.
depends on how many people they convince to follow them and stuff, hey? All right, Leo, you got a story.
All right. Well, I came across this article from the Illinois Family Institute. So
Right.
that raises red flags right away.
Yes, it does.
So it's about a John Hopkins psychiatrist, or a former John Hopkins psychiatrist. And the first thing the title says John Hopkins psychiatrist says transgender is a mental disorder, sex change biologically impossible. So that's clickbait right there.
Yeah.
So the first thing that popped into my mind is I thought that John Hopkins had pretty high standards, but since Ben Carson is from John Hopkins.
Oh, right.
And now this guy is like, all right. They
Maybe
have,
not so high.
They have lost credibility in my mind. But so the article basically goes into, so this former psychiatrist for John Hopkins, Dr. Paul R. McHugh, he says that, well, he wrote this article for the Wall Street Journal, but since I don't have a subscription, I can't actually read the original article.
I think the original article is quite old too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's from 2014.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Could be.
think 2014. But yeah, so these guys wrote a new article about his analysis.
Okay.
So he says that transgenderism is a mental disorder, and that sex change is biologically impossible. So with that, he's not saying that you cannot perform the surgery, but he's saying that whatever surgery you perform, that does not change anything. So the article itself is, I would say, absolute crap. Well, it's just the way it's written. It's not academic at all. They cite various sources, and I'm quoting air quotes, but they don't actually cite the sources. They say that studies show that this is true, studies show that that is true, studies show that this, but they don't actually cite any of the sources.
They don't show links to those studies.
Yeah, which studies. They don't even mention like the names or who did the studies. So that is just, it's poorly done, even if it was a topic that would.
Can we say red flag number 2?
Yeah, red flag. I would say this discredits it right away.
Right.
Like if you're just saying studies show, that's okay. You can discredit right away that is not, if you can't show the sources.
Yeah.
So basically, one of the sources that sources air quotes, they say that transgendered people who have reassignment surgery are 20 times more likely to commit suicide than non-transgender people. So even their own sources are not, it's not even the right thing to ask.
No, that's, yeah.
So you should, if you wanted to really study that, you would say transgender who have reassignment surgery versus transgender people who don't.
Right, yeah.
So
yeah.
that would be the right form of analysis. But so first of all, they didn't even cite the study, air quotes.
Right.
And second of all, even if such study exists, it is not done properly.
Right.
So that's one of them. And the other study that they, air quotes, that they cite is that 70 or 80% of children who are transgender when they are young grow out of it. So first of all, 70 or 80, that shows you that they did not actually cite a real study because, you know.
Yeah, it would be pretty specific, wouldn't it?
70, 80-ish.
Ish.
So overall, the thing is done pretty poorly. But one thing that we discussed a little bit on the Facebook page while planning this, it doesn't seem like this guy has a religious agenda. He does not cite once that it is for religious purposes that he is doing this. No. But
Right.
But it does seem like he is an old school
Which
guy.
is why we did not include this in the religious nuttery section. This was a woo story because of the bad science.
Yeah, it surprised me that he did not mention that. The one thing he does mention in the article, or that they do mention in the article, that while Obama administration, Hollywood, and major media,
because Obama,
it seems more politically motivated than religiously.
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah. So which is first of all a good thing. Like if you shouldn't be basing your science on religion, but you should also not be basing your science on politics.
That's right.
So I would say they are equally bad. Like you don't base your science on an ideology, be it political, religious, or otherwise.
Exactly. For those of you who don't know, you should base your science on science.
Yes.
See, the only thing is,
just in case those listening to this show don't already know that.
The only thing is
That was a PSA.
not to defend this guy, but I actually looked up some of this stuff myself. On granted, Wikipedia. Hey, I only have so much time, and yeah, I'm fucking lazy. But the thing is, I think this guy, this whole transgendered issue has just become something that's popped up in the last year, like majorly. Now the thing is what's happening, I think, is that the studies or like some of the manuals that they use for this aren't printed or studied as fast as attitudes are changing. Because I mean, as we were discussing on the Facebook page before this, I mean, homosexuality was still listed as a mental disorder till I looked it up, 1973.
Right.
And looking at the Wikipedia write-up on transgendered and transgendered issues, these are still the transgenderism is still listed as gender dysmorphia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or what they call it now is body dysphoria. Right.
Well, that might have been something that might have just come in that it wasn't on this article, but they are changing the wording. And what it is you have, I guess, and I haven't studied psych or anything, so I don't totally understand the difference between the two different manuals. But they're in the International Statistical Classification of Disease and Related Health Problems. That's where they've changed. They've already changed. It went from gender identity disorder to gender dysmorphia, and maybe they've changed it to body dysmorphia.
Right.
Since. Yeah. And that was in, I think, the newest one. And they're planning on, from the article I read, and I might be misquoting it, but in the newer edition that's supposed to come out in 2017, they might even be taking it out of even that mental disorder section.
Right.
Yeah,
so at this point, it is still considered a mental disorder.
The thing is, yeah, that may be true. Well, my objection is not necessarily to what the term is on the books. Yeah. I mean, if you have a psychiatrist in Johns Hopkins, just the fact that he doubles down on calling it a mental disorder and saying that you should not be promoting this or not even condoning this shows that he is not open-minded or even open to research.
Yeah, I mean, it could be like, I mean, this guy could be like 2 days from retirement. So last time he took an upgrade.
I think he's past that now.
No,
he's past.
No, he's a professor.
Oh, is he really?
I think. Well, I think he's still a professor at Johns Hopkins. He's no longer a doctor at the hospital.
Maybe that's what I saw.
But as far as I know, he is still in some sort of professor of, so just the fact that he tries to misrepresent, if he wanted to truly do it justice, he could still technically call it what it is technically called, but be honest with the up-to-date information, so if this article is like from 2014 should have better information than, because he, at one point in the article, he likens it to an eating disorder. He says people may feel that they are fat, but that does not correspond with the bodily reality. So which is
the thing is, I'm not. You're absolutely right. The thing is, we don't treat body dysphoria like overweight body dysphoria by telling the people that they're not the way they feel, right? Like, we treat them so that they feel better about the way they are. And as far as gender goes, like, if a person feels like they're born the wrong gender, or the gender that they don't associate with, then it seems like we should treat it as though like almost like a depression, or like a okay, well, what would make you feel happy to be in?
Well, that's exactly what he's saying. So basically, let's say you have an eating disorder and you are very, very skinny and you feel fat. So he's basically saying that we don't make these people fat so that they are the way they feel.
Right.
So that's exactly. So we don't make their body the way they feel their body is.
Right.
We change their mind, which is exactly what he's saying. So we change their mind to how they actually are, which is kind of what you do. What you would do with eating disorder.
Yeah,
you would try and work with them and
so they could see the factual.
Yeah. That's exactly what he's saying. So it's not the right example.
It's not the right parallel.
But so that's the issue with it, because he is trying to suggest that we would never make a person fat just because they feel fat, and we would never make a person or do gender reassignment just because they feel that that's the appropriate thing to do. So,
but I don't think you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's wrong. It's wrong, but that's what he's trying to do.
Body dysmorphia or dysphoria, two different things.
Yes.
Body dysmorphia is like Corey, who lifts weights, whenever he actually makes it to the gym. And he still suffers small man syndrome from it.
Right.
Like, he never feels like he's big enough or anything.
Yeah.
That's body dysmorphia, right?
Yeah.
Body
dysphoria.
Body dysphoria is where you think there's actually something wrong with your body.
Right. So there is a difference.
There's a difference.
Where you're dealing more like, say, a Michael Jackson, where he
that was a dysphoria.
Dysphoria? Okay.
Yeah. The thing about the title from that article, air quotes, is
it was actually an article. Yeah. It was actually an article.
It was a terrible article, but it was an article
nonetheless.
When he's likening people that are transgendered, where it's a mental condition, that's not untrue. And I'm not saying that it's a mental condition that's wrong. It's obviously it is.
Well, I think
because they are the wrong sex, and that can go either way. It could be that their body is right, and their mind is backwards. No, and I'm using backwards as the opposite. Sorry, I'll use a better word, opposite. Or their mind can be right and their body is opposite. Both exist.
Okay.
Right. There are women that feel like they're trapped in men's bodies, and there are people with men's bodies with the mind of a woman. I know it sounds the exact same, but I think that there's reasoning for there to be a difference between the two, right?
There could be.
Yeah,
I don't
that's all
know
I'm saying.
enough about it, I guess.
I plead ignorance on that. I don't know enough to make a comment.
Who's to say that the body is wrong or the mind is wrong? We don't know. We can't know.
I think another kind of wild card into it is like having a bit of an anthropology background is that culture plays a big role. Like sex is science or biology in theory, and gender is culture. Because there's several cultures on the planet that ritually turn women into men. There's different ideas what makes up men, women, whatever. Like
right.
And
yeah,
so,
gender is very cultural.
Well, we had this on. It was like our second or third podcast. We talked about this.
No,
way back when.
It was a while ago.
Because I was arguing with our scientist, the only one that's actually a scientist.
You mean Lana?
Lana, thank you.
It's really hot in here. His brain is fried.
And you haven't been on the show in forever, so I can be forgiven.
Last time she was here, you weren't.
Yeah.
So.
We haven't been on the show together in a long time. But we were talking about that there is a difference between sex, gender, and sexuality. All three things are completely different from each other. Yeah. Completely.
Because I was trying to remember the specific culture, but there was one in one of the former Soviet satellites, and what they do is because women cannot inherit land, title, possessions, really. What they have there is there was women that were just kind of said, okay, there's no men in the family, just for whatever reason, you're going to have to be the man, and they would cut their hair short, they would wear men's clothing, and they would be totally accepted as men. Like there was just no question. It was just they were just accepted as men, and they became the men in the household. So I mean, to draw this very black and white line in the sand,
it's tough.
It's tough, and mind you, I've also heard this before that in different universities, the anthropology department and the psychiatry department, the psych department, they clash because the psychology has such a black and white look at it, and anthropology goes, well, there's this culture, this culture, this culture, this culture, this culture that does these other things. So
it's
maybe a better way of wording what I was saying before about there being two possible ways that it could be either the mind or the body that's wrong is, I think, and I'm not an expert. I'm just talking.
Really?
I'm not an expert at this. I'm a layman, but I've known quite a few. No, I've known some transgender people. I shouldn't say quite a few, but some of them have said that they were born with the wrong genitalia, the wrong physical attributes. But there are some that say, I have these physical attributes, but mentally, that's not who I am, and they think that they should be what the outside attributes are,
I see.
Internally,
I think I understand what you're saying more.
So some of them are want to get their gender, their physical sex changed.
Yeah.
And they go through, and some of them want to chemically alter their minds so that they're at peace with their actual body, because they think that their body is right and their mind is wrong. Does that make more sense?
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
But I think we should try and get a guest on at some point.
Yes,
an expert. Okay.
Yeah, I have it in the books to work on getting actually Callie Wright from the Gaytheist Manifesto to come on. I've talked to her a couple times. We haven't booked a date or anything. So,
but that's definitely a good idea.
It's a plan.
I mean, I don't really understand the biology, but I've heard this tossed out as an idea of where this comes from, because when the fetus is developing, I mean, there's that point where your XX chromosome or XY chromosomes. There's a point where the fetus chooses to be male or female.
It picks it.
Well,
it's like
sort
it
of.
pushes a button.
Whatever that process is, I'll freely admit I have no idea.
Well, the process, I think it's hormonal.
Yeah, it's a hormonal
conditions during which certain times of the pregnancy.
Yeah, and that kicks it in, and that might be where some of that might be, is where it didn't totally shift.
Undoubtedly, there is a biological cause for these things.
Yes.
It's just whether or not we have enough information about it.
But we can all agree that this psychiatrist from Johns Hopkins is kind of a douche.
He's a douche.
Well,
Yes.
I think he's just stuck in his happy days in 1958.
Yeah.
The other part of the title that they can't change their what was the actual
Right,
wording of the title?
that a sex change is biologically impossible.
Yeah, that is also true at the genetic level. Like you will have the genitalia, but you will still
not be able to reproduce necessarily.
No, not that.
No.
You will still have your chromosomes will not change.
Yeah, if they take a DNA, if they
take it right down to the thing,
if they did a DNA swab,
you still present as male or female.
Okay.
At the genetic level.
At that level.
And that's the only. I'm saying on the surface, both of those can be taken as correct.
Right.
I'm just playing devil's advocate because we can't just throw them against the wall and say it's absolutely
When we were
false.
discussing this story in our planning group, I thought that it should go in the religious nuttery first. And because of a group like Illinois Family being the group that's promoting this idea, they're obviously a religious organization. Mm-hmm. And I looked this guy up, and tons of religious organizations use his work as their basis for their anti-trans propaganda.
Because it gives them a scientific basis.
Right.
I mean, it's not necessarily religious, but it's a quick, easy to make it that way.
They use the bad science and they go, oh, well, there we go.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say bad science, but definitely outdated science.
Yeah. Well,
no longer relevant and no longer.
And obviously changing.
I think outdated and bad.
Well, I would say it stops being science once it doesn't autocorrect. Well, once you start making a certain dogma of certain things and don't accept new information, it sort of by definition stops being science.
If the scientific purview keeps going and you keep holding on to this one spot, well, then you're using bad science.
Antiquated. Can we just use antiquated
instead
of bad?
I like that.
There is bad science where it's been proved to be untrue. That's bad science. Antiquated science would be things that are true, but there have been better.
Well, then they're no longer. Well, I would just not call it science at all. Like I said, once you refuse to accept, if you still hold on to flat Earth theory, it's not even bad science. It's just not science at all.
True.
And this is just a slightly milder form of it.
But science is just the best knowledge we have of something at the time.
So then it no longer is science.
It's no longer science because we have better knowledge, and this is now wrong because we see the better knowledge.
But you can call it antiquated science because it used to be.
Right,
the best science of the
So
time.
you can use the word antiquated, but you could also call it.
I'm saying just so you can pare it down and understand the histrionics of it, because bad science would be like Frankenstein.
Yeah,
right?
that's some bad science.
Or trying to convert lead into gold.
That's not science either.
Right?
Actually, I think we're just nitpicking over science.
Anyway, not current science. And again, I wasn't trying to pick apart.
No, of course not.
Anything about the actual people that he's talking about, just about the way that the title is worded. Thanks for joining us on Spreaker. We're on Spreaker?
Shit. I was going to do a whole thing on the mailbag. We actually got a lot of email.
Did we?
Some from Will. He sent us an email asking about the change in episodes.
Right.
And we're doing full episodes live. They then go out to patrons, and then half an episode without the music goes to each week rather than one episode every 2 weeks.
So the interview, the 1 week,
will be this week, come out on Sunday, and then the rest of the episode will come out next Sunday.
Yeah, so this week's episode will be awesome. Next week's will be crap. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. So that's just, other than that, Will had nothing but good things to say. He said, keep up the good work. And he is considering becoming a patron. that would be awesome. Thanks, Will. We really appreciate any support. Ed sent us an email. Ed Smith from The Wayward Atheists.
Yep.
He said, keep up the good work. He doesn't get to listen to us live very often, but he did last episode and really enjoyed it.
Well, good, because I wasn't here, so it would have been a good
yeah, so it was really good, actually.
To the point.
Stayed on track, I
topic.
think. I can't remember.
A couple weeks ago, we got an email from John, who listened to us through the Dogma debate. He found us through Dogma debate, and he quite enjoyed our show on the Orlando shooting. And he wanted to let us know that not all Americans like being called Americans.
The self-hating American.
They would prefer maybe us call them U.S. citizens. I think that was the...
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
a bag of worms.
Yeah, I also...
I'm a Canadian.
He also asked about our tax system and our health care, and I sent him a link to our progressive tax system, and I let him know, tried to help him understand our system of taxation, but...
Planning on moving up here?
I'm far from maybe. I'm far from an expert, but
I have something I want people to chew on until next episode. Are you done with mail? Or do you have any more?
yeah, that's good enough. Yeah.
Something that came up in the last couple days in politics, if people aren't watching, that I'd like to talk about next episode, if I'm allowed back ever. It's always up in the air whether I'm allowed back. They're talking about the. I think we all agree that the first past the fence post doesn't work in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And now the right is saying that we should have a referendum before that gets changed, because that was one of the promises, was to change the electoral system. So it's not first past the fence post anymore, right? So the conservative side of the government wants there to be a referendum on it. I just want people anybody that wants to weigh in in 2 weeks to see what they have to say.
We may discuss that subject.
Yeah. I mean, I know politics isn't directly tied in.
No, it's
but
interesting,
it's important
though.
stuff. So
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
I have a lot to talk about in that regard.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk for another half hour for patrons. You can get that bonus content by becoming a patron at patreon.com/brainstormpodcast. Patrons also get full ad-free episodes the day before the regular feed, including the music. I know some people really like that. Splitting the episodes makes it tough to include the music in both halves, so we don't. You can join us for the next live broadcast by following us on Spreaker. Just enter Brainstorm Podcast into the Spreaker search bar, or you can go to our website, brainstormblog.net, and check out the live show page and the upcoming events page. Remember to book your tickets for the non-con and the AB Secular Conference. Rate us and write a review on Stitcher or iTunes, and definitely hit that subscribe button. Thanks, Dave, for the intro music. Thanks to Alex Capper-Murdoch for the voiceover and for the intro and some of our ads. Thanks to Jason Cabot for our outro. You can find his stuff at aloststateofmind.com. All music played in this episode was either under the SOCAN license or with permission. For more information on SOCAN, you can check out the music license info on our website, brainstormblog.net. You can also get cool Brainstorm gear at cafepress.ca/brainstorm podcast gear. And if you didn't get a chance to contact us during the live chat, email us at mail@brainstormblog.net or go to the contact page on our website.
good or bad mail, doesn't matter. Send us hate mail.
We
don't care.
would love some hate mail.
We love all the mail. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in a couple weeks when we have Greta Vosper, the atheist minister of the United Church of Canada.
I'm excited for that one.
All right.
That's exciting.
Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.
Brainstorm out.
We just wanted to say thanks to everyone who listens to us, shares the show, gives us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or supports us through Patreon and Gumroad. We don't have a lot of interaction sometimes with our listeners, but what we have had proves that we attract some of the best people around. Smart, kind, and cool. An audience truly worthy of the titles hardcore and woo-free. Thanks for helping us make the world a smarter place.
This is an opinion-based podcast. Each person on the podcast is responsible for their own opinions, and those opinions don't necessarily reflect the views of the rest of the panel. Any guests or anyone associated with the people on the podcast, such as spouses, partners, children, other family members, friends, or employers. No one person speaks for the podcast with the possible exception of Corey, and he doesn't speak for anyone else on the show. The Brainstorm podcast does not represent the views of our sponsors.
Well, at least I'm losing weight just by sitting here.
No shit, eh?
I can't afford to lose much weight.
It'll get better. Don't worry, guys.
It will. It will.
You know, Dave,
this
they
is
have
the
those,
hottest time of the year.
Yep.
There's a new thing you can buy. It's it plugs in through your USB, and it's a little mini portable air conditioner.
Oh yeah.
And all it is, it's you know those freezer packs.
Yeah.
It's a small freezer pack, a small motor, and a small fan. And they're good for like 4 or 5 hours on a charge.
I bet you it's loud enough though.
I bet
Yeah.
Probably
almost everything that
I just said it's cool.
Yeah.
Makes a bunch of noise on the
We need to develop AC that doesn't move air volume.
That's right. That just
So
I don't know how
make
that
the air
happens.
colder without moving any of the air.
Yeah, it makes
right.
this is impossible.
So we need Mr. Freeze and his gun.
Yeah. Well, usually, I mean,
Yeah, Dave, it's called a freezer.
usually I cool the air in advance, but didn't have time this time.
If we get rid of enough atmosphere,
Yeah.
it'll cool off.
Fuck me.
Well, maybe what we need is a really long tube that goes out into